Welcome to this edition of Literary Reviews. In this episode, I will be speaking with the authors of the works we have covered. We are at the Inkwell in New York City, where writers often congregate. The authors will be called in chronological order based on birth year. These are the authors on a timeline. We will introduce them from the left of the graphic and move our way to the right side. Our first guest is Mr. William Shakespeare, who wrote the play Romeo and Juliet. I will ask each guest to volunteer interesting facts about themselves. In this case, I have a couple of questions for him. Let's say hello to our first author.
Hello, Mr. Jimmy Smith. I hope you don't expect me to speak in iambic pentameter. I've had my fill of that nonsense.
Oh no, I'm sure our viewers don't want to hear it. Your writings are often set in exotic locations like Italy, Denmark, or Bermuda, but there is no evidence you ever left England. Is that right, sir?
Boy, you watch too many courtroom dramas. You didn't break the case wide open. Yes, I was in England when I wrote them. I'm a storyteller, da.
It is said you rarely wrote plots from scratch. Romeo and Juliet is based on Arthur Brooks' poem, The Tragical History of Romeus and Juliet.
Again, you're right, and again, no biggie. I made the story something that improved on the plot and stood the test of time. What else you got?
Is it true that Juliet is only half of 26 years old in her love scene? AI engines won't even let me state her age, but you did much worse.
In my time, things were different. That is why the issue wasn't raised back then. Am I done? Are you just trying to get clout with your questions?
It looks like male pattern baldness might make a guy a bit touchy. Next, we will talk to a pleasant person, Miss Jane Austen.
Thanks, Jimmy. Your show reviewed my novel, Pride and Prejudice. I will gladly tell you my oddities to prevent your prosecutorial questions. It is well known that I hid my writings if someone entered the room. Once, I refused to have a squeaky hinge on the door to the family sitting room fixed because it gave me a warning that someone was coming, allowing me to hide my work before they entered. And yes, I called off a wedding engagement after one day. My faux pas was in the acceptance, not in the reversal.
Thank you for joining us. You are a very nice person. My beef with William was reading his stuff in 9th grade, where each line required a footnote to decipher it. Our next author wrote, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Mr. Washington Irving. Welcome, sir.
I'm proud to say I left my mark on New York culture by coining the words Gotham and Knickerbocker. I also updated Santa. St. Nick was a somber bishop, but my Santa was a jolly man, smoked a pipe, and flew in a flying wagon.
Thanks, Mr. Irving. You surely left a mark. Our next author was featured twice by us, The Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo, Mr. Alexandre Dumas.
Bonjour, Simi. My story is that my parents were a French noble who became the first black general in the French army and an enslaved African woman. For my books, I used a collaborator named Auguste Maquet. He was a historian who'd find the real-life events and write the initial drafts or outlines. I'd then rewrite them, adding the dialogue, wit, and emotional punch. The Musketeers were actual people, but more notably, the Count of Monte Cristo was based on the true story of Pierre Picot. Like Dantes, Picot was engaged to a wealthy woman, framed by 3 jealous friends, and imprisoned for 7 years. He befriended a rich priest in prison who left him a fortune. Picot used the money to spend 10 years hunting down and murdering his so-called friends.
Much appreciated, Mr. Dumas. Our next author is Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote The Scarlet Letter.
Thank you for having me on. I guess you'll want to know the things that embarrass me most. There is only one, my great-great-grandfather, John Haythorne. He was the only judge involved in the Salem witch trials who never repented for his actions. I was so ashamed of this connection, I changed my name to Hawthorne. I was fortunate to have an accomplished social circle. My neighbors were Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, and I was good friends with Herman Melville.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Our next writer wrote 2 of the stories we covered, A Christmas Carol and Great Expectations, Mr. Charles Dickens.
This is a little offensive. You make me appear as a cartoon and tell me it is because your attempts to show my likeness have been rejected by the AI engine. Although, if I've been designated a, quote, prominent figure, then I guess I'm a little flattered also. Okay, now is the part where I tell on myself. When I was 12, my father was sent to debtor's prison. I was pulled out of school and forced to work in a rat-infested shoe polish factory to support the family. I didn't tell my colleagues about my unfortunate upbringing. Now that I look back, I was just a child. Unfortunately, I've got an adult embarrassment too. In 1865, I was involved in the Staplehurst rail crash, where my train car was the only first-class carriage that didn't plunge off a bridge into the river below. I climbed out of the window, helped tend to the dying, and then climbed back into the tottering carriage to retrieve one of my manuscripts. The twist is, I was travelling with my secret mistress and her mother. I desperately tried to avoid the press at the scene to keep the affair a secret.
Naughty boy. I guess the secret's out now. Sorry we had to make you into a cartoon. Our next guest came from a family of writers, Miss Charlotte Bronte.
My novel, Jane Eyre, contains parts which I took from my life. The abusive Lowood School in the book is a direct recreation of the Clergy Daughters School, which I attended as a child. The conditions there were so horrific that my 2 older sisters contracted tuberculosis and died. The character of Helen Burns, who dies tragically in Jane's arms, is a direct memorial to my sister Maria. While visiting Norton Conyers' house in North Yorkshire, I was told that a mad woman had been confined in the home's attic 60 years prior. A hidden staircase connecting the first floor to the attic was actually discovered at that property. The house inspired my Thornfield Hall. While writing the novel, I was nursing my father, who had gone blind from cataracts. This real-life experience directly influenced my plot when Rochester loses his sight in the fire. Just like my father, Rochester, at the end of the story, regains some of his vision after surgery.
Next is Charlotte's sister, Emily, who wrote Wuthering Heights. If you remember, we rushed through the second half of that novel's review. The protagonist, Heathcliff, was worse than an anti-hero. He was a villain. Some critics suspect his misanthropy is the author's projection.
If you disparage me, I'll do you like I did my dog, Keeper. One thing I'll say for myself is, with a pistol, I'm the best shot in my family.
I'm leaving that alone. Wasn't Charlotte great? Let's move on. Our next guest wrote Moby Dick, Mr. Herman Melville.
So I guess something about me that people may find interesting is that my grandfather was a participant in the Boston Tea Party of 1773.
Being a good writer was not a claim to fame in my lifetime. My book was a flop, but nowadays people consider it one of the great American novels.
The whale is based on a real-life albino sperm whale named Mocha Dick, named after the island of Mocha off the coast of Chile.
Unlike most whales that fled from hunters, Mocha Dick was famous for fighting back.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll hear from the author of Crime and Punishment, Fyodor Dostoevsky.
In 1849, I was arrested for being part of a radical intellectual group. My cohorts and I were sentenced to death by firing squad. We were led to Semyonovsky Square, dressed in burial shrouds and tied to pillars. The soldiers raised their rifles, but at the very last second, a messenger arrived with a pardon from the Tsar, who planned the pardon all along as a form of psychological torture to instill fear and gratitude. I was instead sent to a Siberian labor camp for 4 years.
That's crazy. It makes me grateful for my boring life. Some young people today self-diagnose with PTSD because their high school coach yelled at them. Our next writer is Mr. Jules Verne. He wrote 2 novels we featured, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Around the World in 80 Days.
Nowadays, people say I predicted the 20th century with scary accuracy. I foresaw gas-powered cars, a network of paved highways, fax machines, an internet-like communication network, skyscrapers, elevators, and the electric chair. But you asked to know more about me. I was shot by my own nephew. My mentally ill nephew, Gaston, shot me in the leg. After that, I walked with a limp.
Thank you, Mr. Verne. The next author also wrote 2 novels reviewed by our channel, Mr. Leo Tolstoy, who wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Both were very long works.
My wife, Sophia, and I had a complex marriage. We had 13 children, and she was my dedicated literary assistant. I had terrible handwriting. Sophia recopied the entire manuscript of War and Peace by hand 7 times. War and Peace contains approximately 559 distinguishable characters. While many are fictional, a significant number are real historical figures whom I researched meticulously. The character of Konstantin Levin is considered by some to be my self-portrait. Levin's courtship of Kitty, his struggles with faith, and his desire to work the land alongside his peasants mirror my own life and beliefs.
Thank you, Mr. Tolstoy. The next writer to speak with us is the American, Mark Twain.
I was born in 1835, 2 weeks after Halley's Comet appeared. In 1909, I predicted it is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. I was right. I died of a heart attack on April 21, 1910, just one day after the comet reached its closest point to the sun.
We appreciate you, Mr. Twain. Our next author hails from Scotland, Robert Louis Stevenson. He wrote Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
A little-known fact is that I invented an early prototype of the sleeping bag. For my travel book, I designed a large fleece-lined sack to sleep in. Plagued by respiratory illness my whole life, I eventually moved to the South Pacific for the climate. I settled in Samoa, where I was beloved by the locals, who called me Tusitala, teller of tales. When I died at 44, high chiefs buried me at the top of Mount Vaya.
Thanks, Mr. Stevenson. By the way, the nameplate strangeness is our solution to authors' likenesses being rejected for being prominent figures. The next writer is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He wrote the novel The Hound of the Baskervilles.
I didn't just write about solving crimes, I actually solved them. Most famously, I took on the case of George Idalgi,
A lawyer wrongfully imprisoned for maiming horses and writing poison pen letters. I applied Holmesian methods to prove the police wrong.
My work on the case was a major factor in the creation of England's Court of Criminal Appeal.
Thank you, Sir Doyle. Our next guest writer is H.G. Wells, who wrote The Time Machine.
Much obliged, Mr. Smith. I was not only a writer, but I was also a futurist. I coined the term atomic bomb. I imagined a weapon based on radioactivity that would explode continuously for days. My writing actually influenced physicist Leo Szilard, who later helped develop the real nuclear bomb. Also, decades before the computer age, I wrote about a concept I called the world brain, a permanent, unified encyclopedia containing all human knowledge that would be accessible to everyone globally.
Thanks, Mr. Wells. I guess AI is our time machine to help bring you back. Our next guest is Jack London, who wrote The Call of the Wild.
I lived fast and died young at age 40 and was a celebrity adventurer of the turn-of-the-century era. As a teenager, I bought a sloop called the Razzle Dazzle and became an oyster pirate, raiding private oyster beds in San Francisco Bay at night. I was so successful that I earned the title Prince of the Oyster Pirates. Ironically, I later switched sides and joined the Fish Patrol to catch the very pirates I used to run with. Later in life, I experienced a devastating event. I poured my fortune into building a massive dream home in Sonoma, California called Wolf House. It was a 26-room mansion built of volcanic rock and unpeeled redwoods. In 1913, just days before I was set to move in, it burned to the ground. Forensic experts determined it was likely due to spontaneous combustion of linseed oil rags left by workmen. The ruins still stand today.
Thanks for sharing, Mr. London. The next author in our queue is Franz Kafka, who wrote The Metamorphosis.
In the weeks before I died, while living in Berlin, I met a little girl in a park who was crying because she had lost her doll. To console her, I invented a story that the doll had gone away on a trip. For the next few weeks, despite being terminally ill and barely able to move, I wrote daily letters from the doll describing her travels and read them to the girl in the park. Officially, I died from tuberculosis, but the actual mechanism of my death was starvation. Tuberculosis had spread to my larynx, making it incredibly painful and mechanically impossible for me to swallow. Intravenous feeding technology was not yet advanced enough to sustain me. Ironically, starvation was how my protagonist died in The Metamorphosis.
Thank you, Mr. Kafka. Now, for our next guest, Mrs. Agatha Christie, who wrote Witness for the Prosecution.
Hello. It's true, I'm full of stories. In 1922, long before surfing was a global phenomenon, I learned to surf in South Africa and Hawaii. And in 1926, I vanished for 11 days, sparking a massive manhunt that included over 1,000 police officers and even fellow author Arthur Conan Doyle. I was eventually found at a luxury hotel dancing to a band registered under the name of my husband's mistress. I claimed amnesia, and to this day, no one knows what really happened.
Thank you, Mrs. Christie. And now, the author of The Great Gatsby, Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Glad to be here. So, my wife Zelda is often credited as being the first American flapper. She and I were the epitome of the jazz age, glamorous, wild, and destructive.
I frequently stole excerpts from Zelda's personal diaries and letters to use in my novels. Zelda wrote a tongue-in-cheek review of one of my works stating, "Mr. Fitzgerald seems to believe that plagiarism begins at home."
Thanks for coming, Mr. Fitzgerald. The next author is Neville Shute, an Englishman who later moved to Australia. He wrote On the Beach.
Before I was an author, I was the chief stress engineer at a massive British airship. Also, during WW2, I worked for the Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, worked on the Great Panjandrum, a massive rocket-propelled wheel designed to roll up beaches and destroy German fortifications. It was a spectacular failure.
Jimmy, you said you made a video recreation. Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Look out! It's coming this way! Get back! Everyone get back!
Shoot. I'm glad you had your writing to fall back on. Our next writer is well known to most Americans and most bartenders.
Ernest Hemingway wrote, "The sun also rises." Julian, can you go to the bar and ask him to join us?
Hey, Jimmy, I hear you're a rummy too. Glad to be here. I guess my first story is about the time I survived 2 plane crashes in 2 days. In 1954, while touring Africa, my charter plane crashed. I survived with head injuries, but the following day, the rescue plane that picked me up also crashed and exploded. I arrived at Entebbe, Uganda, just in time to read my own obituaries in the newspapers. Also, I often wrote standing at a chest-high bookshelf with my typewriter. In those days, it was considered unusual. Since then, I hear many people are doing it for health reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Hemingway. Our next and last author is Jack Schaefer, who wrote the novel Shane.
When I wrote Shane, I had never been west of Toledo. I wrote it while living in Norfolk, Virginia, using old diaries and history books to research the setting.
Later in life, after moving to New Mexico, I viewed the settlement in the book as the destruction of the West's natural beauty.
Thanks, Mr. Schaefer. It seems he didn't have a life of trauma and hardship. As time progressed, so did our living conditions. As a result, I guess our life stories seem less impressive. Their stories started off with orphanages and working in factories as children, then things got better. Thank you for joining us with this edition of Literary Reviews.